right. Welcome to Let's Get to the Point. Jona Lemmonds here with David Evans in the house. Let's go. And of course, our special featured guest is Mr. Rob Cook.
Thank you, Jona.
All
Appreciate
right.
that.
Fellow Californians here. We're all like vibing the sunshine. So
Loving it.
I just how do you say it? Because I know we were just chatting a few minutes ago, but we are really privileged to be here in California. So, we have the weather, we have the real estate, that's for sure. If this topic is about real estate and wealth, I think, Rob, you are a great person to bring on and shed some light on what's happening in this wealth side of the business and in your industry. I'm very curious on that. And David, if you have any words to welcome him, go for it.
Oh, yeah, it's our pleasure to have Rob Cook of Cap Trust, um, of Cap Trust based in Sacramento. He's a financial advisor based in Sacramento. Really, the purpose of having Rob on the show is to share with us from a top level what's going on as far as how he's advising his clients to mitigate risks, particularly in real estate investing. I'm sure being that you're in Sacramento, you get the first notice when there's legislation that's coming out that affects commercial real estate owners and business owners in the state, and you advise your clients on how to pivot with this new changing legislation that comes out on a monthly basis many times. We had SB 91 change recently, which was previously AB 3088, and that affects a lot of commercial real estate owners, particularly apartment building owners in California. And our goal is to hopefully you'll be able to share those insights as far as like how are you advising your clients how to pivot in this changing market. We're happy to have you on.
Well, thank you. I'm grateful to be here. And to your point, John, I mean, we are very lucky to be here in California. After last week's craziness with Texas and the whole world freezing and then melting over again, it made me very grateful to be here in California and very willing to pay that sunshine tax that we tend to have around here.
Right. Right. Don't even get me started on the tax because I'm originally from Canada, so I can definitely relate with how that goes. But welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yes, you're welcome. And we were so excited to have you on and for making the time. And, I know you've got a very cool, interesting, story, how you got to where you are. Do you mind sharing about it and then get right to the point? That's what the show is, right?
Yeah, get right to the point. Yeah. So my background is kind of interesting and eclectic. If you go way back in the day, I mean, I thought as a kid that I was going to be a dentist. And then here I am. I'm now a CPA, a certified financial planner, and work as a wealth manager, specifically with business owners and real estate investors. And it kind of a crazy journey. Started off in public accounting. I worked for one of the largest accounting firms in the world, Ernst & Young. Many of you may be familiar with them. For a few years, did my time, putting in those 80-hour plus weeks, grinding away, staring at spreadsheets all day long, but learned a lot of really, really good stuff. I like to tell people that I did the taxes and audits for everyone from international athletes and world-class CEOs to your mom and pops. So I got exposed to some really interesting and cool stuff while I was there. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm the kind, I like to look forward. I don't like looking backwards all the time. And as a CPA working in public accounting, you're always just reporting on what happened in the past. You're just saying, okay, this is what happened and I'm going to go put it in a tax return, or this is what happened and I'm going to audit the financials now. I'd much rather sit here with my clients like I do now and I go, okay, this is coming down the pipeline. How are we going to adjust accordingly? Or how do we want to create a future that you can envision for yourself? And let's find the option that works best for you in your individual case. Because at the end of the day, wealth creation and investing is a very personal and individual effort and process. And so I love that individual piece. I love being able to sit down with someone and really figure out who are they, what makes them tick, what are the asset classes that really jive with them and that they have some serious skills and specialty behind, and then find a way to help them create wealth and then manage that wealth and create a financial future for them and their family that they can enjoy. And that's what I love doing.
So you really like the psychology of it.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, anytime you're talking about investing, psychology is going to be a huge part of what you're talking about, because we
100%.
are emotional creatures. As much as we want to be logical and think we're Spocks, we're not Spock, right? You know, we don't live long and prosper. We're more like Captain Kirk, and we just throw ourselves into the situation, right? I can't tell you how many phone calls I made this last March when the market was hitting the floor, you know, the fastest drop in history. And we just had calls saying, hey, okay, let's talk about it. How are you feeling? Let's talk you through your emotions. We joke we're part therapist, part psychologist, part pastor, part advisor. You know, it's all these different things that we do, because investing in our money and wealth is an emotional business. And so inevitably those types of things come in.
I like how you address that, because that's the front end.
Yeah, it
Really
is.
being able to relate to sort of that empathy mixes with, you know, their personal taste on risks.
Mhm.
So I like how, you know, David brings that flavor, you know, he's very logical, analytical. So I like that it kind of balances for us to ask questions. And so
Mhm.
I'm glad that you shared that, because I remember when we had a brief exchange of our own conversation, you know, you did mention that, and I know that, you know, it's very important for you to relate with your clients in all areas, not just about the investing or investment.
Yeah.
So going back to what David asked, I mean, take us through that. You know, how are you helping your clients pivot around some of these challenges with the market dipping, and of course, real estate market here in California?
Yeah.
Take us through that.
Well, you know, those are great questions. And honestly, every change has its own set of adjustments or things you need to talk about with people. Like, for example, there was recently a law passed here in California about succession and your home if you pass it on to your children. So we had plenty of conversations with our clients about, okay, how are we going to structure this so that if something were to happen, we're to work closely with your estate planning attorney, something were to happen to you all, your kids aren't going to get hit with this humongous tax bill. You know, you can pass your home to your children in such a way that it's not going to be a financial drain on your family, because anyone who lives here in California knows that home prices are ridiculous, right? And if you, for example, if you live in the Bay Area and you've lived there for 45 years, your home that you may have bought for $100,000 might be very easily worth $2 million now. And suddenly, if you had to pay property taxes on a $2 million home, that's very different from a $100,000 home. And so we were talking about those implications with our clients, because there was this interplay between property tax and estate taxes as well. So that's just one example. A lot of my advice as it pertains around real estate and things that with my clients is we're talking about high level ideas and how to position ourselves. And then we bring in a lot of specialists that can specifically do certain things. Like, so for example, let's say I have a client that comes to me, they sell a business, they have a windfall of a couple $1 million. They want to take part of it and put it in the stock market. Great. That's part of what we do. It's one of our specialties, but they want to take part of it and they want to put it in real estate. Great. They should, you know, that's another way of diversifying. Good thing to do there. And so then we have the conversation with them about, okay, do you have an idea of what asset class you want to put it in? Well, I really don't want to manage a bunch of single family homes. We say, well, you probably shouldn't. You've worked really hard building a business. All right, let's find a different asset class. Okay, I think I want to do apartment buildings. Okay, great. Do you have any idea who you would want to use as a property manager? Are you going to buy A, B, or C class types of properties? You know, what type level of involvement do you want? Is this going to become your baby and retire when you quote unquote retire? You know, is this your and then we talk about, let's say they want to do apartments. Okay, are you aware of all these rules as it pertains to things you need to be aware of as the landlord, as the owner, you know, as it pertains to your tenants, about understanding the eviction process, understanding what's coming down the pipeline in terms of your, especially when we're talking COVID here, the more items that went out there, you know, your ability to collect rent. That can be something very important to talk about with our clients. More often than not, clients kind of already know what they want, and then we act as quarterbacks to connect them with, you know, property management professionals. Sometimes, occasionally, we can introduce them to syndicators if that's kind of more the route that they want to go. Sometimes we will just be a resource for them in terms of answering questions, helping them vet out these other professionals that they're using, and effectively act as their fiduciary, the guy that's always in their corner, only giving them what we feel is the best possible advice for them in their situation.
That's, yeah. Go
That's,
ahead.
no, I was going to say, yeah, that, I mean, that's very important. I think that a lot of times, unfortunately, and it's a little bit more easier to be objective in your role, and I guess in your role, but in certain roles, especially down on in my position, acting as a fiduciary is something we threw out the window. Previous up this earlier this week, we hosted an event on a tax strategy called the Deferred Sales Trust, which talks about no, I'm sorry, the Delaware Statutory Trust, correction. That
DST.
speaks
I knew where you were going.
the DST. Well, there's a Deferred Sales Trust too, but we focused on the Delaware Statutory Trust, and we just share how that process works. And a lot of my approach as a commercial real estate advisor is showing people ways that they can sell smarter. Real estate is religion in California, and for a lot of owners, when you speak to them, all they know is 1031 exchange, which
Yeah.
is fine if you're a younger, if you're a younger landlord. And by younger, I mean, you're north of 70 years old. If you want to stay in the business, that's fine. But if you're 70 or 80 or 90 years old, going back into another apartment building and having all your capital tied up there may not be the best exit for you. And you still want to be able to defer capital gains at the same time too. So
Yep.
what a lot of my approach has been personally is showing people ways that they can exit their properties and still be able to defer capital gains and be able to shelter their money somewhere safely. Interestingly enough, sometimes when I have these conversations with owners, and a lot of my relationship building is with people I don't know, so cold calling a lot of it, and their level of defense is let me talk to my CPA, let me talk to my accountant, or my CPA or my accountant didn't tell me about this. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like, so the ends up being the deflection is the equivalent of going to a car dealership and saying, let me talk to my wife. So
Yeah, I can
it's
see that.
really it's really it's really fun. It's getting around that, deflection or objection at times is where the challenge becomes in, because the reality of it, every CPA or accountant is not as knowledgeable as yourself. In many cases, they're not necessarily, up to date on the best practices and ways to help clients shelter their money. And, I just come in with the intention of being able to show them a way where, if you're looking at exiting, there's a way for you to exit and still be able to defer capital gains and not have to get caught in a 1031 exchange looking for an upleg. Because
Yeah.
especially so that's a lot of my approach. Have when you,
It,
what, yeah.
sorry, I was just going to say, it's funny you say that, there's varying degrees of CPAs, right? A CPA is an incredibly valuable tool that, frankly, in my opinion, my personal opinion is that every investor, every person should have a good CPA, right?
Yes.
But there are levels to the CPAs, in terms of um, someone who you go to H&R Block or to, maybe let's say just use TurboTax in general, because that's an easy point of entry for a lot of general retail individuals like ourselves, right? The level of expertise and knowledge that you get there is just going to be different than the level of expertise and knowledge that you'll get at, say, an Ernst & Young, right? It's not that one or the other is necessarily bad, or that they're terrible, we don't ever want to have a CPA there. Well, that's not true. It might fit for your circumstances, and because maybe your tax situation is quite simple, then that would be great. Let's just use them, right? But if you need specialized knowledge and understanding and advice, find the CPA who has that knowledge, right? I mean, I like to tell people there's the gradient of CPAs. Your CPA may not be bad. He just might not have known that because that's not his specialty and that's not what he's used to doing. So we just need to upgrade you to another one who knows that type of material. Because the beauty and the frustration at times of the tax code is that it is this big. There is so much there. It's ridiculous. But at the same time, there are so many ways that if you can learn to use it appropriately, if you can learn to apply the specific rules to your specific situation, you can actually find some incredible savings. Okay, so here's a very simple example, right? I regularly have clients that I've spoken to who are high income earners who've worked very hard, put a bunch of money away, and they kind of have dreams of maybe buying a rental property or two or three, right? And so they'll go out and they'll buy a rental property, and that's great. They get some nice tax benefits from it. They have some passive income, all good things like everyone does. Well, they also like to travel to Hawaii, let's say, right? And they go to Hawaii a couple times a year because they just love Hawaii. And I sat down one time with a client and I said, well, if you love Hawaii, why don't you just buy a piece of property in Hawaii, and then you can spend part of your time looking for properties or quote unquote managing that property or buying a property there, and that can become a business expense, and you can write off your entire trip as a tax write-off. He's like, wait, excuse me, what? Right? All we did is we took your normal life, your normal circumstance, you travel, that's what you like to do. Okay, let's combine your investing with your life, your travel, and all of a sudden you created a tax break. It's been there all along. You just made your situation fit what was already there in the tax code. And all of a sudden you have this great tax break, right? And you can now write off that. You fly first class now to Hawaii because it's a business expense instead of having to fly coach or whatever it might be. You have an entity now that owns it. Now there's all sorts of other things you need to think about and with all of this, but this is a simple example. You can use the tax code to your advantage to not have to, recognize those gains like you're talking about before, David, and make sure you got that CPA who knows those types of things that can talk you through it and take advantage of what's already there.
So you mentioned some really good points, and one of the points is the upgrading. I think the issue at hand is that a lot of people don't upgrade their CPAs. I think that it's a relationship that's pretty consistent. They only talk to them
Yeah.
once a year. They call them when they need something, and the only time they're really consider upgrading them is maybe if they get audited by the IRS or something
or
along
they
that
get a huge
line.
tax bill and they're like, what the heck?
Yeah. So most people don't think proactively when it comes to upgrading their CPA. They may have the same CPA, whereas when they only own the single family residence or a small multifamily residence, and keep that person along the ride for another 20, 30 years to when they may own 100 units. And your tax liabilities change and obligations change over that period of time. And they just don't change them. And I think that tends to be kind of the challenge for someone in my role, when I could try to call to say, hey, you know what, this is an alternative you may need to look at.
Yeah.
I think I called someone this past weekend, and I shared with them the tax strategy called the installment sales trust. And they're like, I've been in the business 35 years. They said, I've been in the business 35 years. I haven't heard of this. And it's really, and I'm pretty sure they have an accountant. They didn't use the accountant objection, but I'm sure they had an accountant. But that tends to be the challenge, is that someone on my end is that when you try to show someone, you know what, there's a wise way you can exit a property. And I think that a lot of times is that, when you're successful, when you end up you are able to get someone's attention when you show them something else they haven't seen before. But the issue at hand is that a lot of them go to the stalwart. I got to talk to my CPA hasn't told me about this. They cover everything. They cover all of my problems. They take their tax liability part of their brain and they put it in their, CPA's responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it a kind of a challenge for people, and definitely in my role.
Yeah. I would say more often than not, I find that objection just means I don't quite understand, so I'm going to defer to someone else, right? It's not, oh, well, I need to ask them. It's more, I don't understand what you're saying, or I don't believe it, so therefore I need to ask someone else, get a second opinion.
Well, I'll even take it all the way to the most basic, because you both made really good points. And considering, we're in very, very different niches, but yet they interconnect. So if you think about it, right, everyday people, like you said, the tax code is there. If you actually look at the lifestyle and certain things that they want to do, it's a matter of them making that choice, that decision, and say, I may need to talk to a CPA. I may need a financial advisor on my side. I may need an actual broker / advisor for advisory, because I own my own property and I may have some equity in there, but I do like to go to Hawaii. So when you start putting those things, together, it's a matter of making that decision and say, I need these people in my team. It's really your personal business to make that decision and say, I need certain advice. I need the creativity that goes with it because, again, you may be busy with your career, you may be busy with your 9 to 5 grind. All that is great, but if we don't make that choice to seek that, then we miss out on certain things like this. So even when you shared about that, like the whole Hawaii trip, I know a few people that do that. And it's like if you try to talk to them about, hey, have you thought about buying an investment property? Maybe you can do this. Sometimes they get overwhelmed because they don't want to be in business. They just want to vacation. But if you don't, right? If so in your industry, if you don't learn to ask those questions, you may miss out helping folks that could use that help. So it's kind of like both ways, right? Somebody needs to make that decision and say, hey, you know what? I need to talk to a David because he could advise on some things in, my particular area here in Los Angeles. And I haven't thought about that. So I think taking it back, I think really financial literacy is one big thing. And I'm a big believer in that. And I think really tuning in and, podcasts and watching videos. And this is for those that maybe haven't thought about that, working with a CPA. And to both of your notes, yes, they go in different levels. You can work with H&R Block for simpler things. You can work with a specific CPA for real estate related matters. And you can also work more intricately in wealth management. So we just want to make sure that those that are tuning in haven't thought about this. We challenge you to start thinking about it because it's really important now. It's very important more than ever, I think, with COVID.
Yeah. And honestly, to your point, you are creating your own team, right? You are the manager, the boss of your team. And even if you don't necessarily want to be in business, quote unquote, you're in the business of your life. So you better manage it like you're the boss, right? And so if an employee isn't up to snuff, what would a boss do? You fire him. Not because, well, okay, let's be a little bit softer here. Maybe you don't fire. Maybe you let him go. You look for a new hire, look for other opportunities. Everyone to describe it, right? But ultimately, you need to have the right people in the right places so that you can be successful. At the end of the day, even as a financial advisor and as a fiduciary, I don't have ultimate responsibility for my clients' wealth. Ultimate responsibility resides with them. I am their advisor that they have hired to manage a portion of it, and I will act in a fiduciary role. Yes, 100%, I will always do what's in my client's best interest. However, they are the stewards, I firmly believe, of their own money, of their own path, of their own future. And if I don't fit in there, that's okay. They need to find their team that fits best with them. And so you have to think of it that way. You can't just say, oh, I just want to be on vacation. That's okay. We all want to be on vacation. Let's be real. But at the end of the day, you are the steward of your life, and you need to be
responsible for that.
Correct.
Right? So we can't blame oh, nobody told me that. You have to seek it. And to your point too, Rob, like it's interesting because, when you hear stuff like this, people tend to get intimidated. They're like, no, I'm not in that net worth yet. Oh, no, I don't really make that much. But what we're saying here is we encourage you to start looking at building a team.
Think like you are.
Right.
You are the asset manager. So to kind of summarize it, you are the asset manager on your own life. And you ultimately have to, whether you put somebody in place to take care of a certain aspect of your business, you're still responsible for it being executed properly. And,
correct.
And to your point, even earlier with the, certain tax account professionals being at certain levels, I think the conversation that I should probably have with someone where they say, my accountant hasn't told me about this. The great point would be like, well, maybe you need to upgrade your accountant. They
gotta be careful though, because a lot of them have relationships with those accountants. Yeah,
they have relationships. And the thing is this though, is that I think there's things that a lot of our, I can speak from personal experience, there are deductions that my, accountant may have not, made on my account, or they may have overlooked as a way of doing it. It's like the same conversation between, if you buy an investment property and thinking getting standard depreciation is the same thing as a cost seg study. It's not the same thing. I mean, and you have to
Mm-hmm.
also be, you also have to be, either open to enough to learn that, or you be, or willing and take that out of your accountant's hand and say, hey, you know what, I need a little bit more thorough, accounting, more thorough, I guess, review of all of my tax, benefits that I can receive because I just made this large acquisition, and standard depreciation may not cut it. I mean, maybe I should consider having a cost seg study done so I can make sure I get the depreciation all up front and not spread it out over 27 years, because I don't think I'm going to hold this property for 27 years. I may only hold it for 5. So, that those are things that you have to kind of think outside of the box. And the reality of it is in my role, a lot of times, and I'm talking to people who are owners who've been long-term owners, they're older, they may not necessarily have that level of sophistication. They already have an accountant in place that's their stopgap measure, but they don't necessarily know if their accountant is keeping up to date on all of the best practices. And that's something that in a lot of ways it ends up hurting them because they haven't necessarily looked at all these options. They may end up having to hold the property longer than they thought they needed, that was necessary, because they didn't have the conversation with someone else to say, hey, you know what, there's some ways for you to exit a property, steal deferred capital gains, and not have to go into an upleg. I mean, there are options out there, but you can't. You also have to be open enough to say, hey, you know what, my accountant may not know everything.
Yeah.
I'm open to learning something.
But that's the beauty of having a team, right? And that's the beauty of our modern economic age, is that everyone has a specialty. Everyone has their niche, however you want to describe it, right? And by having a team of professionals in place, other professionals can see other blind spots that those professionals, the other ones, can't see, if that makes sense, right? And that's why you create a team and you talk regularly with your team, whether everyone all together or individually, because I might see something that their CPA didn't, just because their CPA is in the weeds of doing his other thing. And he might see something that I don't see because I'm in the weeds of doing my job for my client, right? That is the beauty of having a whole team, is that you can catch stuff just like this, like you're talking about, David.
Yeah, we're getting the smaller owners, which is the realm that I work in, to have the mindset of building a team is, I guess that tends to be the hurdle at times. Getting them to say, hey, you know what, you need to have an extra arm. There's somebody who's missing some blind spots, in your in your asset management,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term. And
Yeah,
you need to bring going.
and to your point, I mean, as small property owners, you need to have this team together, and you need to have the team together that is on the same page together for you, right? I can't tell you how many times I've had clients come in who they have one professional tell them they need to do one thing, another professional tell them they need to do another thing, and another professional tell them they need to do another. And all of a sudden, they're just now confused because everyone's sold them on what, not sold, but you get what I'm saying here. They've explained them, convinced them that their thing that they're telling them they need to do is the thing that they've got to do. And I find myself more often than not trying to explain why the other professionals were saying the other things they were saying, or sometimes making a guess, an educated guess. Okay, I think they're saying this because of XYZ, right? But you've got to find a team that works together for you. So like in my role as a financial advisor, a lot of times that's a curse word for a lot of real estate investors, because they just think, oh, real estate's so much better. It's got great tax breaks, and the appreciation here in California is amazing, and cash flow, and all true things, right? But they're used to financial advisors are just like, let me sell you some life insurance. Let me push you on a bank product, right? It's like, well, what you need.
Opposite, Rob, or it's opposite from my encounter.
Yeah, it can be, right? And you just need to find the team that all is on the same page together. Once again, find the advisor who can talk to you about real estate, who isn't not saying, take all your money and put it in an insurance product. Instead saying, okay, that's what you want to do. Great. Let's explore the options. Let's find the best option for you, right? Let's make sure holistically, the big picture, your wealth is doing for you what you want it to do and the way you want it to do it, wherever that makes sense for you.
I think I agree with all of that. I think part of the challenge is, especially smaller owners, is that their concept of asset management is a bit hodgepodge. So there's no unity. There's no unity between their broker is, who their financial advisor is, who their property manager is, who their real estate attorney is. One hand, to the reason why you're probably getting some type of dissonance is that they don't know what the other person is telling them. So they may not even know each other until an actual transaction occurs. So there's no way to be having a meeting of minds or alignment of thought or strategy without, because you're pretty much kept separated from each other by the owner for
Well, yeah,
whatever
because
reason.
that's life, right? I mean, more often than not, the owner comes to the one professional for the one thing that they need. Come to your CPA because you need your taxes. You're going to go to your broker because you want a new piece of property that you're trying to buy. You're going to go to your financial advisor because you got some money you want them to invest for you. Whatever it might be, right? I personally think that you're spot on, David. You've got to have those interactions between all the professionals, and that's why sometimes I like to tell my clients, well, I want to be your personal CFO. I want to be the guy who sits in the middle with you, and I interact with all those guys and help make sure that everything is coordinated together. I don't want to be everything to you, but I want to be able to make sure that we've got everything covered for you, interacting with the other professionals who will cover those things. Yeah, it's incredibly important to have those professionals that all are connected and on the same page.
Yeah, agreed. Oh, definitely some great insights.
This is why we can't have too much wealth, David.
Well,
this is a problem.
I think most people would say it's a good problem to have.
It's a good
first world problem.
Yeah, no, agreed. Well, Rob, how have you been advising your clients to, navigate the pitfalls with like SB 91, the eviction moratorium, things like that, Proposition 19, which you mentioned earlier? How have you been advising them to navigate those pitfalls?
Well, once again, Prop 19, for example, let's just take Prop 19 because that's a recent one. Prop 19, we coordinated closely with their attorneys. A lot of times clients weren't even aware of the implications. So we've had a bunch of meetings over the course of the last few months with our clients. And as they come in, we say, hey, okay, are you aware of Prop 19? Is this something that we need to be thinking about? And we'll just kind of review their personal asset, real estate investment holdings to make sure that it's not something that we need to be talking to their attorney about. So we won't directly advise them on that. More often than not, once again, we're those quarterbacks. We're the ones sitting in the middle with them. So we try and understand the whole financial picture so that we can go, oh, we need to look out for that. Let's bring your attorney in. And we're going to have the conversation together. Same thing with SB 91. We'll sit down and we'll go, okay, hey, how's it going? What are the rent rolls like on your properties? Are you seeing the same returns that you were getting before? Because that's actually an inherent, not issue, but it's something that every real estate investor needs to pay attention to, is your year over year return, especially as buy and hold investors, right? If you hold a piece of property for 20 years, it is not having the same return for you in year 20 as it was in year one. That's just the nature of the game, right? You have less tax breaks, you have less amortization, you have more capital put into the building. So therefore just the overall cash on cash return is far lower. And so we'll have those types of questions. Okay, what does rent look like? What are you doing to mitigate that? How can we help you figure that out? Who can we connect you with? Who do we need to bring into the room and have these conversations with? Do we need to be looking at other assets for you? Because like say for some investors, let's say they're 80 years old, right? They don't want to have to deal with the rent moratoriums. Let's be real. They're at the point in their lives where they just want to enjoy their time with their kids and their grandkids and not have to think about it. And perhaps just having a property manager isn't doing it enough anymore because the property manager is reaching out to them all the time and they're saying, hey, we're having these issues. Hey, we've only collected, 50% of the rent this month. Oh, geez Louise, and all of a sudden it's starting to worry you. Now, granted, that's, hopefully situation's not that bad, but I think you get the point I'm trying to make, right? We try and have these frank conversations with our clients, not because we're trying to tell them, hey, move money here, move it there, move it here, give it to me. More like, in your best interest, are you getting out of this what you want? Is this providing you the life that you want? Is this, and if it's not, what do we need to do to fix it? Let us be your quarterbacks. Let us be your fiduciaries. Let us figure out the best way to do this so that we get you back to where you want to be.
Great points. What I've kind of learned in my experience is that multifamily owning apartments is a different than any other asset type in commercial real estate. There's an emotional attachment to it, especially the smaller owners. It's almost like a residential connection to it. They're able
a lot of times they know the tenants. because
Yeah.
they've been the landlords themselves many times.
Right. So there's that. There's also the work they've put in the property over the time that they've owned it. So there's more of a narrative towards it that makes it more emotionally attached to it. Makes it harder to detach from that investment, whether it's performing as well as it was previously or not. And that's why
it's important to have the conversation, right?
Yeah, more like
Once again,
objectively.
those emotions are right there on the top when we're talking about investing.
Right. The challenge tends to be, in my experience, is that it's me having something to gain from effectively from them making the disposition of that property is a different conversation than yours, because yours there's nothing to particularly gain. So it comes better even when you're telling someone the truth. The truth depends on who the messenger is in many cases. So I guess it's incumbent upon people like myself to connect with more people like you, to be able to see if their clients are having any pain with their investment properties, and to see if I can help provide a solution for them, or anybody else in my role for that matter. Because that tends to be the challenge, is that when you're talking to someone and you don't have an existing relationship with them, you don't know what their financial health looks like, or their investment property health looks like. Ultimately, the CPAs, they do. So you guys are the people to really, I guess, connect with. I think it's really important to be able to really ascertain who needs help and who doesn't, because the reality of is, if I can't help you put you in a better, if your situation is already ideal or optimized, there's no value that I can create for you. But if there's a chance, there's a place where it's not, then that's where I can create value for you. So finding out who's in that place where they have pain points is really key, and finding out who has the pain comes to talking to people like yourself.
Yeah. Bring on the pain, right?
Yeah.
Empathy plays a very big part in any of our businesses. So I think if that is where we focus, especially post-pandemic, I think there will be more people we can help. Like what Rob said, we are the steward of our own, but also we are the steward of everybody else's well-being, because I think that's how we can look at mitigating risk. It's more emotional and psychological, more than just figures and numbers, at least the way I've been practicing my business. So, I entered my industry, I was 19, so it wasn't about the numbers and how to calculate. It was more like, how do you deal with people? How do you deal with their issues and challenges? And they won't tell you if they don't feel that you are, there solely for trying to understand what they're going through first.
Yeah.
I think all the technicalities, and you guys are welcome to chime in as we close. I think, for me, when we look at where we are with COVID and all these new laws and rules and the chaos that our governments are facing right now, and we're being impacted one way or another, whether you're wealthy, middle class, or maybe not so. I think at the end of the day, we are in that ecosystem. And I think being the professional CPA, being the professional broker, being that I'm in the investing side and I'm trying to get people to understand financial education, real estate, etc., I think that's secondary. In my personal opinion, I think understanding what do they want? You said it, Rob, what are you going through? What do you want? How do you see that working out for you? What can we do to help? So I think that's what makes us thrive and succeed in the idea of serving, because really we're in the business of serving. It really is. It really is. I mean, we're willing to put in the hours and the time, right? Believing that they will be our client. So I think for someone that, maybe needs to kind of reevaluate and reassess their own profession, right? Or whether they're the customer, I think the value there is they can understand what we go through. We're not just making calls and saying, hey, what can I do? Like, they also can understand that we're human. Like, we have things that we have to give up so we can serve them. So it's a give and take, right? So like you said, Rob, aligning, right? Meeting the people that's going to be in your team, and really, aside from, being a CPA, I think to you have the human side. Like, you have to have the human side in this industry.
Agreed. So, I recently was talking with, listening to some trainings on digital advertising, digital marketing, and the guy who's giving the training said something that I think goes right along with this. we can talk about business consumer, business to business, however you want to describe any and all situations in which we're transacting business. At the end of the day, it's human to human, is what he said. And I when he said that, I stopped and I was like, you know what? He is spot on. It's human to human. It doesn't matter what role you're in, what value you're trying to provide in whatever industry you're in. At the end of the day, it's human to human.
That is a great conclusion on that. I so agree. Bringing out the humanity in this industry. That even rhymes. Wow.
Well,
I'm rhyming here, guys. All right.
You're a regular old rapper over there, Jona.
well, you know what? On it, I hope to get to that place where the relationships become more of a nuanced thing when I'm servicing clients. At this end of the spectrum currently, it's more of like, what can you do for me? It's a one, it's a what can. So and I guess that comes, like I said, with time. But yeah, but I do try personally, and my approach to client servicing is look at the human, their concerns, their issues, see how I can serve them best. I'm assuming the reciprocity comes later down the line, but it's in any particular case, if you're going to be in each of our respective industries, it's all about service.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Well, we got right to the point, guys. Thanks, Rob, for joining us. You can find him at his own podcast, The Contenders.
Contenders Wanted. That's
Right?
a podcast I do on the side. You can come and check us out. We're on
go.
all platforms, all podcast platforms. We got actually website just launched the last few days ago, contenderswanted.com. Come and check us out there.
Yeah.
Simple. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, just Rob Cook, CPA, CFP, Certified Financial Planner. Or you can feel free to email me at rob.cook@captrust.com.
Absolutely. We're all actively engaging on LinkedIn. So we will see you guys in the next episode. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Rob, for joining us.
That was
Appreciate
great.
it.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Jona.